Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi there, friends and my students in YouTube. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. I gave a chance to provide questions to my students and friends in my Facebook fan page. It is Shahid Academic Forum. I received two interesting questions. The first question was asked by Khamisatul Husna. So I took the questions here. I took notes. Now, um, the first question is from Khamisatul Husna, and the second question is from Anisa Khoiria. The first question is, what do you think about the killer lecturer in a campus? He also makes his students sad with his statement. Yeah, that is very interesting, right? How to improve English speaking with fun ways, sir? Okay, now one student asking two questions. Now let me answer the first question. What do I think about the killer lecturer? Okay, now let me ask you once again. What do you think about the killer lecturer? As far as I understand, the meaning of killer lecturer is a lecturer who acted in such a way that makes his or her students feel a bit uncomfortable to be in a classroom. That's one thing. And the second thing is that when you say the killer lecturer, I assume that the lecturer might give low score to the students in general in the classroom. Although the students have done very well in the learning process and the teaching process of the classroom. So depending on how you define the meaning of the killer lecturer, basically killer lecturer is a term that is made by students for categorizing the unpleasant lecturer. Well, in my case, if you meet with a killer lecturer, the question is you need to define what is the meaning of the killer lecturer. What makes you think that the lecturer is killer lecturer? Now, if you notice that there is a particular lecturer who is known as a killer lecturer, now you need to switch off your mind. You need to think the other way. You need to find the solution. You need to read the syllabus in the beginning of the semester, and you need to ask the lecturer about the things that he or she likes or the things that he or she doesn't like when students do and contact them. That's what you need to really understand it. Okay? And then what about he makes the students sad with his statement? So making statements sad students is actually is one of the code of conduct of the lecturer. As far as I believe that any person who is working as a lecturer understands that making a bad statement in front of students is not good at all. Depending on which culture that students learn, in Indonesia, for example, the lecturer needs to use polite language because the lecturer is an example for the students. If you study in English education, then you need to see in what ways you can take example from your own lecturer. If you hear something bad or a false statement in front of the classroom or while you are communicating or conversing with your lecturer, then you need to split the bad stuff, just focus on the good ones. But if you feel really discontent and you feel uncomfortable with what you hear, then you need to tell that to your lecturer in such a polite way, and you need to look at the situation. If you just encounter the lecturer in the classroom, it's better to say it directly, but in a polite way. Now you need to. This is a good time for you to learn about the personal characteristics. So I myself, if I have killer lecturer, at first it was so sad to have that kind of lecturer, but then I'm thinking about how to deal with it, how to face it, not just run away. You need to communicate and talk. The more you communicate, the more you have conversation with that killer lecturer, the more you will understand what he or she expects from you as a student. So remember, your relationship with your lecturer is a professional relationship between teacher and students, between professor and the college or university students. You need to be really professional at that point. Now, I do hope that my answers help you for that point. So, Khamisatul Husna, for your second question is how to improve English speaking with fun ways. Okay, if you ask me how to improve, first you need to start within yourself that you want to improve it, you want to use it because this is language. It is very different from mathematics. In mathematics, you have pattern, and then you work the pattern, and you solve the problem. Problem solving. That's the logic of the mathematics. But in language, it is different. Learning foreign language, especially English in Indonesia, needs a lot of practices and not just theories. When I was junior high school, I never memorized dictionary, but what I did was every time I read a text and I encountered several vocabularies that I do not know the meaning, then I highlight the words, and then right at that time I try to use the words in speaking. That's the way for me to memorize what I wanted to say in English. So one day at a time, you will remember the words. You will understand the exact meaning of the word within your own capacity. So, well, yeah, reading dictionary is very good for you to get the meaning of the word, but you need to remember that every word has its own meaning in its particular context. Now, to understand context takes a lot of time and effort and practice. That's from you. And my second tip for you to do is to find friends who want to practice English with you. Friends, so you are learning together with you are playing with your friends. I had two good friends. I'm not going to tell you their names because, well, they're actually working right now. We usually practice English when we were in our spare times. After going back from school, we walked together on the street from school and then went back home. We used English. I realized that everybody was looking at me at the time, but then I quite enjoy it. We practice, and uh, f- as for you, speaking with fun, do not focus on grammar. You are using English in the sense of a foreign language. It is different from learning English as a native language. Remember, so do not put yourself too hard. Take your time, step by step, slowly but consistent. You need to use English all the time, consistently. At least if you have 24 hours a day, spend 1 or 2 hours a day just to use English intentionally. So very intensive using English. That's what I can suggest for you. Now, the third tips to improve English speaking with fun is to find interesting learning materials. Well, interesting and very good learning materials is very helpful for you. And above all, you need to see English as part of your language. Never see English as a part of your learning subjects at school. You need to put your mind that you can master English, that you can communicate with English speakers. Indonesian peoples are very rich with linguistics hemisphere. For example, I was born in Bandung and I learned Sundanese language when I was in 5 years old. And my parents brought me to Padang and I was raised in Padang. And then I learned Minangkabau language as one of the ethnic languages in this Indonesia. Then I went to school, I learned Bahasa Indonesia. Then I met Arabic languages to read Al Quran and speak with the Hadith and prayer in Arabic as a Muslim. And then at the same time, I also learned English. So if you really pay attention to that, I believe because if you were born in West Sumatra, so your first language is Minangkabau language, then you might also believe that Bahasa Indonesia actually is your second language. And after that, you learn Arabic as well as you learn English. So you are very rich with that. Focus on what you want to study and then put your mind thinking that English is your language. Make it as part of yourself. You have to love English. If you learn Japanese, then you have to love Japanese language. And you do not need to be English speakers. No, you don't have to. You just need to open your mind to understand, oh, this is the way how this language works. Put yourself into it, and then you will understand, and you will be the good bridge between the big, huge culture between your country and the English speaking countries, like I'm doing now in the cross culture understanding subject. Okay, I hope that's very helpful for you. Now I move on to the second question from Anissa Khairia. Okay, now this is very interesting question. Right. Anissa Khairia asked me about negotiation between two countries. What kind of cultural match or mismatch variable based on Leah Newman explanation, and how do they work? Now, I asked Anissa, and then Anissa told me that Leah Newman said that there are six variables in cultural match or mismatch theory. They are first the context, high or low context, and second, type of community, whether it is collectivism or individualism. The third one is perception of power, which is superior or inferior. Fourth, how long the negotiation should take, long or short term orientation. And five, distance between the parties, geographical proximity distance. And the last one is type of political system, authoritarian, democratic. Now, if you ask me about negotiation between two countries, yes, cultural match and cultural mismatch is very important and very influential to the negotiation. Now, if you link to the Leah Newman explanation, I would say that negotiation between two countries will work smoothly if the cultural match works there. If something happened, which is what factor that bring a negotiation into successful negotiation or not, based on Leah Newman explanation. Okay, now if two countries have cultural mismatch, at least two, three cultural mismatch, then the negotiation might take a bit longer, depending on the circumstances. So we start from the understanding of negotiation. What makes the negotiation happen? What was the main factor or reason that create the two countries do the negotiation? If negotiation is dealing with political issues or geographical issues or economical issues, basically the two countries can work it out because they have diplomacy and they have a certain ways to deal with that. Now, if let's say, I give you an example, if the negotiations should take place between Israel and Palestinian, for example, it's a very long, long story, and even it is still happening today. That is geographical conflict and issue. If negotiation happens, then they need a sort of mediation between the two countries. If there is no negotiation or no mediation, then one side will dominate the other side, depending on which. Then that's the question. If the perception of power. Now, if two countries, I give you, yeah, this is very basic example. The because you asked about two countries, then I will go on with Israel and Palestinian. That's the exact fact issue on earth right now. Until I think now in the perception of power, superior and inferior, geographically speaking, Israel thought that itself was superior due to the existing acceptance of the big nation like the United States of America. Now, while Palestinians thought that they were inferior because their position had been put into the West Bank or Gaza and so many different places in the area, so that still emerged and conflict happens, and in Syria as well. And we need to differentiate what kind of issue emerging and that sense, so that context, whether it is political, geographical, or it is economical issue, or it's about historical conflict that happened again during this time. So we need to differentiate that kind of thing. Otherwise, we're going to see it in a very different sense. That's what I'm going to say with you. Now, if the question is what factor that bring a negotiation into successful, negotiation can be very successful if we make the two countries see themselves equal or balanced. If one, for example, like A and B, A thinks that the context for them is high, while B thought the context for them is low, then the negotiation will take longer time. And in terms of type of community, whether it is collectivism or individualism, so we need to have that kind of mediation between A and B country. A thinks collectivism, for example, North Korea applies the concept of communism or collectivism, that everyone's gathered together for the nation or country. But the United States has its individualism. So, how to deal with those two things? We need to use the mediation, and that's the um task and purpose of the cultural diplomacy, the ambassador. So, people who understand the culture of the opposite country then can be placed as a bridge to connect between these two countries. So cultural negotiation to reduce the conflict can be achieved very well. Now, how they both working? And then your question, Anissa Khairia, you asked me how long the negotiations should take, long or short-term orientation. Now, the meaning of long or short-term orientation is that the negotiation, if the negotiation is conducted for the purpose of achieving the long orientation, then that means that the result of the negotiation will bring good or positive impact for both countries for a long term, long orientation. So it's going to bring uh, multiple benefits for the two countries. That's the long orientation. So as long as it is important, then the negotiation to take long orientation, long term orientation. But if it is only short term, for example, um, if you ever heard about a country that come to the area of the Indonesian maritimes and then they stole the fish and the sea animals around Indonesian maritime sea, then that will cause a short-term orientation negotiation. For example, like between Indonesia and Malaysia, some Malaysian ships came to Indonesian archipelago and they took the fish in Indonesia, then we need to apply this short-term negotiation. So the purpose is for short-term, and we do the negotiation with the conflicting countries with Indonesia or between A and B. Then we need to use the purpose of the short-term orientation. I hope you could get the idea. And the distance between the parties, geographical proximity or distance. Now that's the point. If the conflict or the negotiation happen between two neighboring countries, I give you another example: Indonesia and Australia. So drugs or marijuana, cannabis, and all the drugs were and substance were considered illegal to be used in a mass production in this country, in Indonesia. But in Australia, cannabis, drugs, and all those kinds of things can be used if the users are already 18 years old, and if they have the legal permission from the doctors, that which is fine, and they get drugs and they drink alcoholic drinks. So if they are more than 18 years old, now if that kind of lifestyle is brought to this country, Indonesia, and they brought the alcoholic drinks in the airport or in the harbor, then they will be captured by the police officers. If at the same time they bring drugs, then they will be captured and put into jail. So there was a cultural negotiation between Indonesia and Australia at that time. That's the actual form of the cultural literacy. If let's say if you go to another country one day, you need to understand the culture of the country. You need to read more about the country before you visit, before you come, and you need to find someone who can use English in the country, and at least you learn the language of the country. So that will be so helpful for you to interact. Now we come to the distance. If this is short geographical proximities between Indonesia and Malaysia, or Indonesia and Australia, but if it is happening between Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, then that's a geographical distance, quite long. It takes a bit of time whether we visit Saudi Arabia or the Arabian visit Indonesia. But basically, we do not have that much problem with Saudi Arabia because most of Indonesians are Muslims, I would say, and we understand the Arabic, even though we do not use Arabic on a daily basis, and we don't have problem with the United States and in Australia. Is just cultural misunderstanding. Then go back to your question. Negotiation will not be successful if the cultural mismatch is considered to be very important factors and no parties try to understand each other. So there is a selfish orientation in the negotiation. If a country tries to understand the particularities of B country, at the same time, the B country tries to understand circumstances that A country has, then there will be a good cultural negotiation and that leads to successful negotiation. Okay, I hope that I answer your question. Khanisatul Husna and Anisa Khairia. If you still have further question, don't forget to ask and write your question in the comment section below. And for everyone, I'm very open for discussion. I'm learning from you too, and then I never consider myself as correct. If I had mentioned something misleading according to your opinion, please don't hesitate to type it, but still, please use good and polite language. Okay? Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye.